This week on Buffering, we are thrilled to be joined by Candy Reim, Vice President of Marketing and Customer Solutions at Midwest Energy and Communications, and Megan Powell, Regional Vice President of Success, Broadband Platform here at Calix. We are very excited to have them both join the podcast today to discuss really where we think the industry is going and what current market insights can tell us about that future.
Thank you, Gabe. And Candy, Megan, welcome to Buffering. I think this is your guys' first time on the podcast, so we're super excited to have you here. But Candy, just starting out with you here, could you talk to us a little bit about your role at MEC?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been here 25 plus years. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Customer Solutions here, which just means that I support everything that touches the customer, from the communities to the customers, through education and awareness solutions, which is much different than when I started. When I started, we didn't have a marketing department. We had no competition. We were an electric provider and no fiber. Now, fiber customers rival our electric business.
All right, thank you. And then Megan, again, thank you for joining us as well. But we'd love to hear a little bit from you about your role and responsibility here at Calix.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. A longtime listener, big fan. I started at Calix 4.5 years ago. I started on the product marketing team, and I joined the customer success team about 1.5 years ago. I took on responsibility for the solution success for Engagement Cloud. And then just recently, my role expanded to encompass Service Cloud, so our customer service domain, Ops Cloud, Operations Cloud, so of course, Broadband Operations domain, and then Intelligent Access, in addition to Engagement Cloud and the marketing domain.
And with that, pretty recently here, you were pretty involved with the Calix Market Insights. Could you talk to us a little bit about the launch of Market Insights?
I would love to. So, through marketing, through that journey of starting in product marketing, then moving over to customer success, I've noticed that in conversations across the business, there were a lot of folks who were observing that there is a gap in analyst activity, where in other industries, there's a lot of attention by firms like Forrester, Gartner, and IDC. There really isn't a ton available for ongoing research and what are macro dynamics and consumer trends, and then what are some benchmarking efforts being done across the industry. And this really came into focus in my customer success role, where we interact with customers on a day-to-day basis. We see their business operations. We talk to them at a really in-depth and granular level. And so we have a lot of wisdom to share. We have a lot of intelligence, but it truly comes in the format of being anecdotal and sort of case study based. And so this Market Insights initiative has been our effort towards really codifying that, making it a data grounded initiative to put our data and our best intelligence forward for the industry, for our customers, and really just our best effort to serve our customers to make strategic decisions in their business.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I very much agree with you, Megan. It's something that we hear very commonly in Candy. I'm sure this comes up in conversations you have a lot too, and I know we're going to touch on this later, but it's the how do we compare to others? I think that's one of the struggles. It's really understanding at that deep level, how am I doing against some of the other providers? So one of the big topics we wanted to discuss today with both of you is, again, really looking out to the future. Where do broadband service providers generate revenue in the future? We know that there's tremendous pressure on ARPU, and there's more competition that creates risk of churn from all kinds of different providers. And I'll throw this question out to both of you, but looking out kind of a few years, where do you see new revenue streams coming from? And Candy, I'll throw that to you first, and then Megan, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too.
Sure. So I'm going to go back to like 10 years ago when we first started, you really looked at that build and growth. And, outside of that, which was pretty big in itself, were acquisitions or hostile takeovers. That's our CFO. But now we're coming to the end of what we see as the build with bead. That's kind of the last bite at the bucket, right? So we'll do that. And then what happens next? Um, gosh, beyond normal just take rate, because of fiber, things are so much different with the technologies and data centers and AI out there, and looking at what we can do for our community. We're saying like fiber is not the end goal now, it's the foundation for what comes next. So what can you do in your community? In our instance, where we had the opportunity to look at, we had a plot of ground to build something for the community, which is our smart park. And that was kind of our next step, is what do we do next? What can we look at? What can we see our community needs through, whether it be business insights, or being, up on the local EDC, to talk with them and bring that to light.
I know that's something, Megan, I know you've been a big proponent of, is understanding the economic impact of the solutions that our customers are bringing to market. But just to hit on something that you said there, Candy, before I hand it back over to Megan, I think this is a very common theme that we hear from a lot of broadband service providers that we're talking to right now, which is we've made these big investments. We've been on this we're building, activity for the last, really decade. And now it's, how do you monetize these massive investments that you've made, not only from a take rate perspective, but again, what's next? And I loved what you said there around fiber being the foundation for everything that you're building on top of that, and all of the different types of, potential types of services that open up with that really high quality level of connection that you have, to then build up from that foundation. So anyway, I just wanted to circle back to those couple of points, because I think it's, again, something that we're really commonly hearing from a lot of providers right now is, yeah, I've been so focused on construction. Now I need to shift my mindset a little bit. So, Megan, I guess, similar question for you. I know you have kind of a different perspective, with your teams talking to providers every day. What are you hearing in, coming back from your team members?
Yeah, we're talking about revenue generation in the future, and increasing ARPU. It will be no surprise to you to hear that, a lot of what we're focused on today is how are you packaging your services? Um, how are you making the offering that you're putting in front of your subscribers really feel personalized to them, and specific to their wants and needs? In marketing, we talk about how do you win hearts and heads, and so like how are you serving, either addressing a pain point or showing them something that would be really cool or like really helpful in their day-to-day life. It's we had Robert Herjavec, who is I think he's one of the original Shark Tank guys. I think he had a cybersecurity firm that he started. He joined Michael on stage a few years ago at Connections, and
I remember
I
that
thought,
talk. That was a
do you
good talk.
remember?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was sitting in the audience for that one. That was a good chat.
Yes. And so I was feverishly taking notes because he put such a fine point on this concept that I think we all kind of know, but he was speaking to unconsidered need, right? So sometimes as marketers, you kind of have to show and tell a consumer or a subscriber what they want. Maybe they don't want to have to tell you what they want, or maybe they don't even know that they don't want to have to tell you what they want, but you can just put it in front of them, and their sort of just psychological reaction is to be drawn to the thing. And the easier it is to transact with you and to find the thing that feels very personally, responsive to their personal wants, needs, pain points, is going to be the best way to win their business and win their trust. And then beyond that, kind of in that same vein, it's when we think about 5 years in the future, um, we've talked about this a bit at Connections as well, and just sort of with our customers is what's the opportunity to start thinking about, the baby boomers are getting into they call it the silver tsunami.
Mm,
It's this big wave of folks who are going to want to age in the home. And they also have a pretty significant spending power. So, what are services that broadband service providers can offer those folks who want to age at home? Because connectivity um, and care that's provided that's connected is going to just be such a tremendous opportunity. I think that's just one example I have
I
been
love that
discussing lately.
example. And poor Zach and his generation is just, kind of out of luck because all of the boomers have all the money. But yeah,
Don't
Kenny,
remind me, Gabe. Come on.
sorry, buddy. This is everything you constantly hear, right? Is that the boomers have all of the money, and Gen Z and all those generations are totally out of luck. But hey, here it is what it is. Just make Zach work harder. So before we move off of this topic, I'd be curious, Candy, to hear your perspective on that bit that Megan just talked about around, that whole aging in place. This is something that we hear very commonly from a lot of our customers is that, well, we have a little bit of an older demographic in the areas that we serve. And I do think there's a tremendous opportunity there. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, to be perfectly honest with you. I think the technology, like we've maybe need to figure out what the technology actually looks like here, but just spitballing, like I'd love to hear your perspective on where on that topic.
Oh, I'm 100%. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, coming from the co op world, obviously you're in rural America. I think a lot of times you're going to get that age demographic that you're like, well, the first thing that you do when you deploy fiber is you educate because they haven't used computers. They're probably not big on things, at least when we started 10 years ago. Facebook, we have a community action agency across the street. And that's the first thing we did was we started education sessions.
Hmm.
What is Facebook? How do I use it? What's Pinterest? That silver tsunami, 100%. And so we started getting into that, like, okay, how do we get into aging in place? What kind of medical devices are out there that we can showcase or do videos on? Like, um, you know, there's blood pressure cuffs and different things that they could use at home and send information to their doctor now because they don't have to travel. So a lot of that is coming more into play, and we're super interested to find out, how do we utilize that? How do we either bundle that together? Are those giveaways? What does that look like? um, Sometimes though, it's who do I need to reach? Is it actually that aging parent, or is it their kids,
Such a
so
great
they
point.
can get the device so they can watch mom and dad? Now, we did something probably most people don't do. We moved, behind our parents so we could be right there for them. Everyone can't do that. So such a difficult dilemma that we're dealing with, and we're still trying to figure it out. So I'm all in to try and figure out with Megan, how do we do this and who do we talk to?
Yeah.
I want to rewind a little bit and then we'll go and I want to talk about Market Insights a little bit more and NPS. But one of the projects you mentioned that you did built
Mhm.
off that fiber foundation was the Smart Park initiative. Candy, can you talk to us a little bit about what you've done there and how you've partnered with the community and even where you see this smart park going in the future? What's next?
Absolutely. So what Zach's referring to is our smart park, and it's the Southwest Michigan Advanced Research and Technology. And really, it wasn't a planned thing. And that's probably the beauty of it, honestly. When we were moving into our new building, because we were building fiber, our employee base was growing astronomically fast. So we ended up buying a new or building a new building here, and we were looking around for land to do that on. And I don't even know, Gabe, you know this, but when we did, the Ed Lowe Foundation is here in Cassopolis. Now, if you don't know Ed Lowe is the founder and inventor of kitty litter.
Did not know this.
Super interesting. Super interesting. So he had a foundation here where he had a lot of land, and it just so happened that it really made sense for us to move just down the road. to build our new building. So when we did that, that foundation said, you can build here and we'll let you buy land, but you have to buy several acres. And when I say several, I mean hundreds of acres, which we didn't need, obviously. But we said, okay, we still think it makes sense. And, maybe we'll just turn it around, give it back to sell it to the farmers and let them farm the land, because basically that's what was happening in this field. When we got in and we built the building, new ideas and thought processes came to light. And our CEO, which has since retired, had the idea of putting in a smart park and went to the board, and they were like, that's a great idea. That is an amazing thing for your community, for our community. And we're going to support that. So we were able to put in the infrastructure. We have rail here, which is a big thing that a lot of other development areas don't have. So rail, fiber, all of the infrastructure that you need to create this smart park that otherwise there's really no one in the area that would have done that. And I feel like that would be similar to other rural areas. There's not a lot of really big entities. Now, since that point, we've had our first tenant from Norway come in. So just what we've been able to create, because we did partner with our community, which you have to do to bring in companies like Hydro from Norway. We've actually just have our second one signing on the dotted line now. That's not even been announced. So to be able to do that and give back to the community in that way, with jobs, with economic growth, um, you know, that's not something that everyone can do, but it's just starting to think about, what is fiber bringing to your community that can grow it outside of just servicing a home or a business.
Yeah, that's the bit right there, Candy. I love that
Mhm.
perspective of, and it goes back to the comment that you made again. And I realize I repeated this a couple of times, but I just love it. It's fiber as the foundation for everything else that you're building there. And you've been able to, build this smart park, have that economic growth in the areas that you serve. And it's a virtuous cycle.
Mhm.
People move in, they're obviously going to buy internet service from you. And,
Right.
if they're doing better from an economic perspective, they can buy more services from you. So yes, it's a virtuous cycle, but it's leveraging those investments that were already made in the infrastructure. It's interesting. You mentioned the rail piece. It's like super old technology, super new technology, all kind of combining
Coming
together for
together.
something that it's sort of interesting juxtaposition there. But that is pretty cool. I love that. Thanks for sharing that story. I think that's really cool, and I completely agree with you that it is something that other providers could be thinking about. They've made these large, infrastructure investments. What are the other things that they can do to build on top of that,
Mhm.
to leverage the massive dollars? I mean, this is a very capital intensive business that we all operate in, right? It costs a heck of a lot of money to build infrastructure. What are the other ways that you can, look to leverage that?
Mhm.
And that actually, I sort of talked myself into a nice transition there. But coming back to Megan, I'd one of the other questions that we get very commonly, Megan, is, again, how are we comparing against other providers? Candy, I
Mhm.
think back to the conversations that you and I had when I was your success manager. That was a question that we had, we talked about a lot. And I think, Megan, something that comes up very frequently in conversations with other folks on your success team. So you mentioned the Market Insights initiative that you've really been spearheading here, looking to answer those questions. Could you just talk to us a little bit
Mhm.
more about what data are you starting to gather? I'd also love to hear about, I know we've partnered with Corey, the Center on Rural Innovation, and done some really cool things there. Could you maybe talk just a little bit about the data that we're starting to pull together, and then what that partnership looks like?
Absolutely. So I'll start first answering your question about sort of what is the overall market insights, we'll call it a hub
There
look
we go.
like?
I like that.
What is it? How is it? What are its components? And then I'll talk to you more about the core report, because that is such a cool a cool part of Market Insights. So we just launched in June, and so I'd say this is our very early. We put it like this is the worst it's going to be, and it's pretty good. Um, that's how we're
Hey, we all
that's
got to
how we
start
put
somewhere,
it.
Megan. It's fine. I'm with that.
MVP, minimally viable, but
Hmm.
it's not even minimally viable. We came out with a pretty strong showing, I think. And
Agreed.
I worked with a great team to get it out there. So that's just kudos to them. Um, but so we started out kind of just thinking about, again, what are the questions that we get from our customers on a day-to-day basis in customer success and of course across the business. And so I'm positioning this as a customer success work product, but it really is, we partnered with Carrie Hahn's team and with our marketing colleagues and business insights services, that team, and just this is a big like gathering and amalgamation of all the intelligence and insights that we have across the business, and trying to put it together in a really cohesive and easy to consume way. So there's a few areas that I would point. If you were going to look at market insights for the very first time, there's like a couple areas I would point you to first. The first is we have a service availability map. The first iteration that's out there now, you can literally plug in your zip code and filter by technology and see which service providers are operating in that market, what are the speeds they're providing, and at what price point. That data is sourced from FCC. We're scraping FCC data, so it's a little tenuous. We're starting to supplement that with web-based data. So what's actually out there in market. So that's going to become a little bit more accurate. That's my caveat and why I'm saying MVP. Um, so that's coming soon. As we're trying to help our customers understand who else is operating in my markets, or if I'm looking to expand into additional markets, who's there, and sort of what does the competitive landscape look like. So that's one really cool interactive tool that we have out there today. We also have an ROI tool, so you can plug in a few different values, such as what is your footprint today? What is your ARPU? What is your homes passed? Um, and then some questions around, do you have value-based offerings? Do you have managed services? Like, do you offer Arlo or Bark or parental controls, things like that? And then how do you operate your customer service um, domain? And we'll answer those questions, and this tool starts to churn out like what is your potential ROI if you were to add incremental managed services, if you were to make shifts in your go-to-market strategies, things like that. So that's an interesting tool that you can kind of play around with and see what if, and start to assess different changes in your business strategy. And then we also have a growth readiness assessment. So if you're thinking like, okay, I think I'm ready to make some maybe broader scale changes to my business. How am I doing from an operational standpoint? Am I ready to go and tackle this? There's just some basic questions you can answer. And then, of course, your customer success team is always here to help and come alongside once you've taken that assessment and walk you through that if you're a Calix customer. So that's market insights in a nutshell. And then speaking to the Corey report.
Mm.
So again, this is the Corey stands for it's CORI, the Center on Rural Innovation. This was a years long survey and study that they ran. It was co-sponsored with NTCA and the Fiber Broadband Association, along with Calix. And overall, if we were going to just bottom line the study, it finds that the higher a community has in broadband utilization, which is defined by higher adoption rates and a higher prevalence of small broadband service providers, that dramatically and it improves the economic position of rural communities, sometimes to a small scale, and in some cases quite dramatically. So um, let me give you a number. 213. And so 213 is the percentage of business growth rate improvement in rural counties that have a high utilization.
Hmm,
So that was
interesting.
the biggest number I could find in that report. Um, but then on top of that, self-employment growth rate, it was a 10% higher. Per capita income growth rate is 18% higher, and GDP growth rate is 44% higher. So I thought that was pretty cool. I do want to mention, Candy, I think are you in Cass County? Is that right?
Yes.
I looked you up, and for some reason they were showing smaller numbers, but I'm wondering, like, so I think this study was ranging from 2020 to 2022. So perhaps with your Smart Park initiative, we might want to see if that um could potentially grow come in the next round of study
Yeah,
that
that would
they
be
do on
interesting.
this. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be really interesting. Yeah, and the cool part about that tool, I played with it a little bit, is you can do those comparisons across counties. So being able
Yes.
to, say, okay, I'm operating in this county and what are the differences between, and there's a tremendous amount of detail that you can get into on that Corey report. It's a really very, very
Yes.
informative report for sure.
Gabe, I'm pretty surprised that when Market Insights launched, you and I didn't talk more about this because the second you and I have access to more data, we're
Yeah,
geeking
it's
out over
usually
it. So
dangerous.
we'll need to pick up on that conversation and see how dangerous we can get. But just shifting a little bit here, I want to talk a little bit about NPS. And NPS, of course, is Net Promoter Score, very common metric with a pretty consistent question, of course, being how likely are you to recommend our business with a scale of 1 to 10? And it's great because you can measure across different industries, different business sizes. However, there we see a lot of different ways people track this. And Candy, can you talk to us a little bit about how you're measuring NPS and what you've seen? One of the things Gabe and I have always talked about is that honeymoon period and how that impacts the data you see with NPS.
Absolutely. And yes, we've seen it. So, first, we do measure NPS. And honestly, we were introduced to it through Calix. So, we used Business Insights and we did a study. We did a survey and got our NPS score back. And this was, I think, last year that we did that. And so, we did that holistically, got our NPS scores back, and they were really good. And that was great. What was even better was all of the analytics that came behind that, because really we were able to see through the life of our customers, those NPS scores varied greatly. Traditionally, you survey your customers after you install them, right? And that's that honeymoon phase that you're talking about is everyone is super happy. They've just gotten fiber. You've changed their life. So of course your NPS is going to be very high. And we would look at that and we're like, oh, look at our NPS, look at some other well-known providers out there that their NPS is much, much lower and sometimes a negative. So you pat yourself on the back. But then we dug deeper into it. We are like, wow. So after they've had our service a few years, that NPS score falls down. Now, that's not that we did anything wrong or we've changed our service in any way, didn't even change our price. So, what's happening there? We're not doing something. So then we would see, okay, well, gosh, all of those people that had an interaction with us, even if it was like a tech call because there was something wrong, whether it was our fault, their fault, whatever it was, the NPS went back up. So that tells you that you really need to have ongoing engagement with those customers. It's not like set it and forget it. How do you continue to engage with them? How do you send them how do you show them what you're doing for them ongoing? So that process was really telling to us. And we use that information today. Now we continue to measure NPS scores. And honestly, we're looking at how we change reporting those because when you report on a month worth of NPS, it's it's not really a good way to show what you're doing. You really need time and time, not just time, but points in time to
Mhm.
say, this is what's going on. So,
Yeah.
just that insights team is phenomenal, and what you get back from them that you can share with your board, the rest of your leadership group, is so helpful.
I'm so glad you said that about the it's not a set it and forget it thing. And this is something that Zach and I talk about very frequently. And I, I, I hear this term or phrase a lot from customers that I used to hear it a lot more when I worked in customer success, but we don't want to bother our customers. We don't hear from them and we don't want them to hear, if they don't need to hear from us. And it's like, no, you do. You do need to let them know that you still exist, because if the only touch point is I'm taking money out of your bank account every single month, then exactly what you said is going to happen, Candy. Over time, resentment starts to build and those net promoter scores are going to decrease. We see this over and over and over again with the studies that we look at. So I love that you're building in those additional touch points. Like you said, what are you doing for them? I know you all have done things like, here's how many threats we've blocked via the network security service Protect IQ, and here's all of the different things that we're bringing to market. The different services that you're launching, those sorts of things. It has to be that ongoing. I mean, would any relationship work if we didn't talk to anybody, right? If we didn't talk, it's not to make it like too deep there, right? But I mean, a customer relationship is a relationship, and you need to be able to continue that ongoing conversation, whether it be digitally or otherwise, to keep things going.
I think it's great to relate it to something. If I hadn't talked to my spouse in 2 years, do you think they might still be interested? Who knows? You
Uh,
know, they've moved on.
yeah, exactly. That would be a little weird. I got to tell you, yeah, that'd be some awkward times at Candy's house for sure. So I want to continue this NPS discussion. Megan, I'd love to hear your
Mm,
perspective on NPS also.
yeah.
One of the big issues we see is that, and Candy, you mentioned this, there is that transactional NPS versus relationship NPS. And what you mentioned there about, hey, we have a technician that went out and installed the service, everybody's super happy. That's great, but that's a transactional score. It's not a
Mhm.
relationship score. And I know I'd be curious, Megan, just to hear, as you've been digging through the data with market insights, any advice that you give to providers to improve the insight that they're getting from their NPS surveys when they're out asking these questions?
Oh man, Gabe. Well, so first of all, I would 100% defer to the business insights team on on that question, because they will know that the answer to
They
that
are
a
a
lot
smart crew.
better. But it does. I would say the repeated. Candy said over time. I think that's spot on. Exactly. Like, so survey and get your baseline, and then survey, and then put your campaigns in market, and start your loyalty program, and start your sort of broader initiatives, and educating your field techs and getting your full. I love the idea of marketing as being the chief dot connectors in an organization. You're setting the messaging and the positioning, and then you bring everybody else along. You kind of help every single part of the overall process and the execution of that messaging, and that overall sort of like here is our mission. um Help everybody see their part of the mission, and execute that and be that mission in front of your customers. And marketing is really the most critical part of helping everybody see their compelling why, and they're part of that story that your brand is telling, and what your overall like again, like I said, like your mission. How do you fulfill your promise to your community as a co-op? So again, I again, chief dot connectors for the marketing team. But again, so you're doing that in your market, and you're putting that in front of your subscribers. So let's come back a year or two later and measure and see, how did that impact. um One of the things that I did not understand about NPS, and that I have learned, is that you can be really exacting and surgical and see real pockets of opportunity and say, "Oh, okay, these people they're dissatisfied," and we can get very like granular in the type of campaign that we deploy to be um very specifically responsive to what they're unhappy about. And I think that that's kind of magical. That's the magic of marketing again, right? The art and the science. And so I think that that's really fantastic. The other surprising finding that I found, just to kind of go into the surprise of it all, is the people like choice. And so there is a trend of a higher NPS if there's more than one service provider in their community or serving their market. If there's
Mm.
only one, then I think the psychology must be, well, I guess this is what I got. And so this is my service provider. So they like the option to have a choice. And if they chose you, then they're just that much happier with you. So I thought that was a pretty cool finding in addition to the honeymoon period. So I love that
Yeah.
Candy brought that up too. That's such a good.
I'm going to change your name, Megan, to, can we call it CDO, Chief Dot Operator? I think we gotta go for a new acronym
I
here.
like it.
Yes, I
Okay.
I will love that. Please. I love
All right.
that.
Well, as we wrap up here, again, thank you, Megan and Candy, for coming on to Buffering today. But I do want to hear, one last thing from you both. You each have a wealth of experience working for providers and working with providers. What's one piece of advice that you would give to leaders at a BSP or listeners to the podcast who, maybe are looking for that one metric to track? What would it be?
Hmm.
This is the hardest question, Zach.
And the tough part is you could only pick one because normally I would never say that.
Okay, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. So, I worked at AT&T ages ago, and we tracked employee NPS,
Hmm.
and so it was called ENPS. And for giant organizations like that, it's probably a lot more necessary than for smaller ones. But I think if I were going to track one, that may be the one.
I like that one. That's a good one.
That is such a good answer, Megan. I kind of want to steal that. I mean, that's who, and at the end of the day, that's who is taking care of your customer. And if you're not taking care of them, who says they want to take care of your customer?
Mhm.
Oh gosh, I want to steal. I want to change my answer, even though I haven't given. I did write it down, but I'm 100% there. Take care of your employees. And I'll say co-ops are notorious for doing that. I feel like that's something we do really well. You create that family, and once they feel part of that, they're there for you.
Well, and I think this is it's a very interesting answer, especially because we are living in very interesting times. And Zach and I talk about AI a lot on the podcast, and
in general. Let's be honest,
yes,
Gabe.
and yes, and in general, yes, a lot of
Yes.
Zach and my text messages back and forth to each other are AI related. But again, we're living in a very interesting time where work is going to change. And so understanding what is going on with your employees and what they're comfortable with and how they're comfortable making this transition is going to be really, really important over the next, whatever decade, probably, right? As a lot of these solutions start to really take shape. I continue to think about, Candy, your kids are a little bit older than mine, or are older than mine. They're, getting ready to enter the workforce or entering the workforce. What's their life going to look like? I think about this a lot with my children who are much younger. What are their jobs going to look like? As they start to get into a career, it's going to be very, very different. And your employees are thinking about these things too. So, Megan, I think it's a super good point of understanding where people are at and what is their capacity for learning and growing and changing, because there is going to be a subset of people that are like, this is the job that I do, this is the way I'm going to do it. And I think that is one, that is one negative thing, Candy, that I have seen in some of the co-ops is there is a lot of, hey, like, this is the way we've always done it and we don't want to change. And I'm sure you've seen some of those struggles over the years as well. But it's just such an interesting time to be alive. And with all these changes that are happening, it's going to be so important to keep that pulse on what's going on with the employee base to make sure that as you're asking them to do things in a slightly different way or potentially in a radically different way, as these solutions really start to take over, what is their capacity for change and interest in doing that?
hmm hmm And how do your leaders lead that? So,
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Man, that's a heavy topic to like
Mhm.
end this
I
conversation
know
on,
it's.
but
I feel like I'm leaving here like a little heavier now. I'm like, ooh,
Oh,
Mm,
Well, now we need a
mm,
part 2 episode,
part
so
I
two.
yeah.
know.
more to come. But
Mm,
Megan, Candy, thank you so much for joining us today on Buffering, and
Thanks for
thank you to
having
everyone
me.
who's listening.
Such a pleasure.
And thank you, yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn.